Hi everyone and welcome to a new video showing my entire process for making a shadow box. This time I wanted to make a box about My Hero Academia, portraying my favorite scene of the entire show, which is still true today. At the time of recording I finished season 6 and this is still my favorite bit of the entire show. This is the second fight between Deku and Bakugo. And I decided to do a bit of editorializing with this scene, because what happens in the actual show is that they fight in like a city replica, which is great in the scene, but just as an image it was less visually striking, so I decided to link it with what's at the core of their fight, which is the All Might fight, what happened to All Might, and the responsibility he's giving Deku and Bakugo in a sense. So I thought it'd be nice to connect the two. So I imagined that the whole fight was happening in the ruins of the All Might fight, because I thought that would be a little more thematically significant and also a bit more visually interesting, because that meant I could do a lot of cool things with ruins and debris. The downside to that is that to find reference for all of the ruins, I looked up a whole bunch of wartime cities and looked at a lot of photos of that, which was a bit depressing. Although, not great, not a fun time, but I do like how the background ended up looking, and I think it gave a bit more weight to those two fighting. Here you'll see me redraw them a billion times, because I used a chapter cover to get their poses, and the cover stops at like their arm, mid-arm. And again, I've never learned how to draw. I just kind of I learned on the fly, so I don't know what looks accurate. And I'm very insecure about my drawing skills, so I spent a very long time trying to get these to look good, because unlike what tends to happen in my layouts, I knew like the hands and the feet would be in full display. There is nothing in front of it. There's no other layer of paper to hide the hand, the foot. So yeah, a lot more pressure to try and get this right, and a lot of asking for my siblings who do know how to draw. Does this look right? How about now? Is that better? All Might there was a lot easier, because it was just a question of like just copying that pose he makes at the end when he's like, "You're next." And even though like his hand would be hidden behind a layer of building, it would be like the shadow of it would be pretty clear through the building, so I needed to make sure to get that right. And what you'll see later is that I didn't want his silhouette to just be there and be too stark. I wanted it to be a bit more like a mirage, or I don't know, his spirit floating over them or something. So he's going to be behind a layer of tracing paper to make him a bit more blurry, and less stark compared to the shadows of the actual characters, to make a contrast and to make it feel like he's not there physically, but he's definitely there in spirit, being the reason for this fight, in essence. I also hesitated with Deku specifically, because when he activates his quirk, he's got lightning strikes, energy strikes all around him, and I hesitated in doing that in paper form, like just tendrils coming out of him, and I decided against it, because I thought if I did that all in the same layer, then the tendrils would be just as visible as his own silhouette, which didn't sound right to me, because they're like bolts of energy. It's not even clear in the show if they're visible or if it's just like how the show visually represents the fact that he's just incredibly strong when he uses his quirk. So I didn't want it to be too visible, and I decided to do them as well with a layer of tracing paper, as you'll see later. jury's still out on whether that was actually effective or not. Yeah, there we go. So I wanted to add Bakugo's explosion as well, which was a little easier. It was just a question of doing an outline out of paper, then pasting it on some tracing paper to make it seem like so that you can see the outline of it, but that it's see-through enough that it can come across as fire explosion, so that it doesn't like eat up the whole hand, and you can see that it comes out of the hand. And this is like my second attempt at trying to make tendrils that will come out of Deku. What I'm doing there is that I just drew on the fly a bunch of tendrils on paper so that I would have a guideline to then cut them out into tracing paper and paste them on him. I'm not entirely satisfied with how it turned out, because when, like, you can see them a little bit here, but when he's a part of the box, and especially when you turn on the lights, you can barely see those tendrils. You have to look really closely to notice that they're there at all. So in one way, it's good. I think it's better that you don't notice them, that you notice them too much, and it would make him look too fuzzy, or I don't know, like weird tentacles coming out of him, which I didn't want. On the other hand, I did want them to be noticed a little bit more than this, so maybe there was a better way to go about doing it. Maybe if I'd gotten really thin paper, but paper nonetheless, instead of like see-through tracing paper, maybe that would have worked better. That's just a little mental note for me for next time I do something like that. Maybe look into, I don't know, maybe 60 GSM paper? Oh, maybe that could work, I don't know. I'm not actually all that knowledgeable about thin paper, because when you're making a shadow box, you want paper that's a bit thicker than average, because you need a certain level of thickness for it to stand upright, otherwise you risk it like folding over. You also want it just thin enough that it's not gonna wreck your hand when you're doing, say, things like doing ruins and cutting really thin lines and little holes everywhere. Doing that on really thick paper would completely wreck my hand if I do it for too long. That being said, I think it was around at that moment, like for those final layers, that I got into a weird state of mind, because this was really late at night. I'd been working on this for a long time. My hand was hurting, it was cramping up, my back was hurting, I was tired, I was not having a good time, but I wanted to keep going anyway. And I just I kept pushing myself, and I was like, yeah, I'm like, oh, my hand hurts, but I can't stop, I have to finish this. And I really didn't. I had no deadline for this. This was a just put it online when it's done sort of piece. So it's like I had no, I can't explain why. I just randomly decided that no, I must finish this in one night. I guess when you're too absorbed into something, it sort of becomes you gave yourself a goal and you have to finish it, or you won't be able to sleep or something. I don't know. It was a weird mindset for this one. There's also always something really tricky when you're doing stones or rubble or rocks, stuff like that. I find it a bit difficult to decide which lines to highlight and which details to include to, like, sell the fact that you're looking at stone and rubble and things. I think I did okay. I think that this looks pretty good, but it was a bit of a struggle for me. I struggle with stone. I struggle with rocks. So I hope like all those lines indicate properly that these are rubbles. It's not foam or plants or anything like that. This was also why I chose to make certain lines really thin, just to add an extra bit of texture. without really highlighting them too much, so that you can get a nice clear definition of which lines show you the actual silhouette versus which lines are just small textures. Like the little wear and tear on All Might there, that's in comparison to his hairline, his shirt line, his clothing fold lines. So that's something I'm always thinking about when I'm cutting. And this is me doing the strips of foam to paste on each layer of paper to separate the layers and give it that nice sense of depth and of 3-dimension, and also to allow the light to shine through each layer and make the shadows a little bit starker. And this is me making the frame. Figuring out how to improve the frames is something that took me a very long time, and it's one of the very few things that I actually went and took a class for, because everything else I kind of learned with trial and error and taught myself, like looked at tutorials online and whatnot, but making the frame was impossible to figure out on my own, and I needed help to do it. So by now I figured out a pretty good way, but I'm still working on little details to improve, little things that would make them sturdier, better. But here you go, here's the finished frame. I really want to revisit this box at some point. This one's been sold by now, but I was thinking I might make it again and work on the background a little bit more, because I really like the scene and I like All Might in the background there, but I think there's something like that could be improved with the background and with the way the buildings are framing the characters. So I think this is a box I'm going to revisit at some point. Stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if you're interested in seeing all the steps involved in creating this box in a less sped up, more chill video without commentary, then you can check my step-by-step video on my channel. You can also find photos of it and more on Instagram, where I post everything regularly. Check out my Etsy shop if you're interested in buying my products, and don't feel free to reach out if you want a custom shadow box. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and see you at the next video!